Okay, welcome. Thanks, Georgia. Thanks for being here.
Great to be here.
I'm Kaarin Hardy. For anyone watching who doesn't know, I'm Kaarin Hardy. I am a co-founder and co-president of Leadership Council San Mateo County, and I'm here today with Georgia Farooq, who is the executive director for Thrive, the Alliance for Nonprofits in San Mateo County. And the reason for this video is we are Leadership Council. We have our Leadership Immersion Days, and every month we focus on a different topic. And for this month's topic, we are focusing on human services and the role that nonprofits play in San Mateo County. So given Georgia's role, she's the perfect person to do some scene setting and tell us a little bit about the background of the work of nonprofits in the county, the successes and challenges. So again, thanks for being here, Georgia. And in addition to being the executive director at Thrive, Georgia is also a founding board member at Leadership Council San Mateo County. So we'll go ahead and jump in. In terms of the nonprofit sector, as we're focusing on the role of the nonprofit sector in San Mateo County, I thought we'd just give just a small snapshot of the size of this sector in the county. So we have, according to your most recent nonprofit landscape report, there are 2,700 nonprofits headquartered in San Mateo County. And they're reporting over 3.7 billion in revenue, which is obviously a considerable part of our budget here in San Mateo County. So can you tell us, Georgia, a little bit about Thrive Alliance and the role it plays in the county and working with nonprofits?
Great. Sure. Always great to be here, Kaarin. And I want to say, first off, congratulations to you and Margie and the entire team for just all the success you've had with Leadership Council. And it's grown tremendously. And I'm always happy to come back and talk and meet the new classes, which is always a lot of fun. So Thrive is, as you know, an alliance of all nonprofits for San Mateo County. We are there to really unify the sector to promote and support a nonprofit sector that contributes to the economic and social health of San Mateo County. So we feel that the nonprofits are integral and oftentimes unsung heroes. So we might sound like a membership organization, we are, but I think we're a little bit different in that we are not there only for members. We're not a transactional organization. We're really there for all nonprofits of all shapes and sizes. One thing that you'll learn through the course of this day, or maybe you already know if you're involved in nonprofits, is how diverse the sector is. And so Thrive is there for all different kinds of nonprofits. We have three main buckets of work. So we've got our cross-sector collaboration, and that's where we partner very closely with the private sector and with the public sector and bring nonprofits and philanthropy all together. We also have our more traditional capacity building work, which is all sorts of things around strategic planning for nonprofits and leadership development, but specifically for nonprofit leaders, things like fundraising and board recruitment. All of that goes within our traditional capacity building work. And then we have our policy and advocacy work, which is really robust and which cuts across 5 issue areas: arts and culture, basic needs and safety net, which is really the focal point of today, which is kind of the catch-all for all the human services work: food security, housing, homelessness. All of that work falls under there. Environment sustainability is another very, very important area for us. So you may be familiar with it, our climate summit. Those of you that are watching, last year we had over 300 people at our climate summit, really important event where we partner with our community-based organizations in San Mateo County. And we can't forget children education. We've got a big summit coming up on that where we're partnering with the San Mateo County Office of Education. And so we're looking at partnerships in education and how do community-based organizations that are in the education space sort of partner with even the public sector and the school districts. And immigrant and workers' rights, which also really flows through a lot of our different areas. Finally, civic participation is kind of the 6th, and this is an election season, and we are actually going to be partnering with Leadership Council San Mateo County on some upcoming candidate forums. That's just a little taste of the work that Thrive does.
Well, I have to say the work that you do and the breadth of work and the depth of work is incredibly impressive. I think I never cease to be amazed by the quality of the events that you do and how thought-provoking they are, and really the breadth of services you're providing to nonprofits and really making sure that they are healthy and striving and really, you know, and striving to achieve what their mission is and service to the county. So why is it important to have a thriving nonprofit sector? Why is it important that you're doing the work that you're doing to help them succeed?
Right. So I often tell the story of kind of how I fell into the nonprofit sector and, right out of college. And it's because I loved these things that I loved arts, I loved education. And I found out that they were, okay, these are the areas that are actually underfunded
Mm.
traditionally, often underfunded. And oh, wow, there is another sector for them. There's this third sector. That's not something that I necessarily learned in books in college, but then I sort of found myself really drawn to organizations that were doing this mission driven work. And so we need, for better or for worse, there are gaps in terms of what the private sector contributes, in terms of even what government contributes. And I hate to define the nonprofit sector in terms of filling gaps, but there is an element of that. There's a reason that we are known as the third sector. But I think it's also just a home for people that are really passionate about doing good in the world and making social change and contributing. So I think there's a way to define it by its kind of assets also, and not just the things that we're trying to, like the holes that we're trying to plug. So really, if you care about quality education, if you care about the arts, if you care about social justice, if you care about the future of our planet, you should probably have an interest in a thriving nonprofit sector.
Wow. And you touched on a specific kind of nonprofit, which is that service provider, and who is filling very real gaps in the services that we provide to the community. We often talk about core agencies, and there are 8 core agencies in San Mateo County. But can you tell us what a core agency is and the role that they play in the county?
Sure. So core service agencies, as you mentioned, there are 8 here in San Mateo County, and they're really the touch point for individuals and families that need uh, assistance in terms of stabilizing their lives. And
Mm.
so they're there to provide referral services on a number of issues: food, housing, um, even access to education. There's so many different ways that these core service agencies provide support. They partner with the Human Services Agency in San Mateo County, so it's a department. And so the department doesn't necessarily outsource all of its work to nonprofits, but it does say, it sort of says, hey, it's really important for services to be place-based. And
Mm.
so they're geographically located very strategically. So you have some that are in North County and, Daly City. You've got the YMCA as well over in South San Francisco. You've got organizations on the coast side like Puente and Coastside Hope. So a range of organizations that are really place-based, and they know their communities really well. This is also important when it comes to getting folks to be comfortable with accessing services. So uh, obviously the importance of offering translated services, the importance of offering, so I think, some level of confidentiality, anonymity to the extent that they can.
Mhm.
There are always sort of restrictions when you're, evaluated for services, and when, in terms of qualifying for services. But I think these core service agencies really work hard to try to, number one, protect the dignity of those that they're serving, and then also make them feel comfortable so that they don't feel like, okay, I'm individual, an undocumented immigrant, and don't want to have to deal with law enforcement without, it being like an absolute necessity. So there are ways that I think the core service agencies really build trust with the local communities so that people can feel comfortable trying to ask for rental assistance and all those other things.
Mm. Yeah, fantastic. From my understanding, as you alluded to this, it's that intake as well. So you may come for one service, And perhaps you're thinking, I'm going to access food bank services. And then also the having that, as you said, place-based approach where they can also say, okay, I noticed that you have an elderly person in your home. Do they need services? And really having that community approach to providing those services.
And I think that's the vision we all have. I don't think we're there yet. This idea that it's going to be really seamless, that they don't need to see the individuals needing services, don't need to see all the silos and all the different departments and all the different agencies, but that they're just a human being and that there are these wraparound services that are available. Again, this is the vision that we all have, and we all really work hard towards breaking down these silos. I know that your organization does. I know that these core service agencies do. I know that the county, the county executive and the director of HSA, they're trying to do that. It's really challenging though, but there is an attempt to do that for sure.
Yeah. So one of the many things that Thrive does is you do a report on the health of the nonprofit sector and sort of looking at the landscape and identifying challenges. So you've just released your study for this year. This is 2023, the 2023 study. So can you tell us how is it going? What are the biggest challenges that you noticed, and what are some things that you'd sort of like to highlight that really stuck out to you in that assessment? And we do have that as part of the pre-reading for those watching. It's part of the pre-reading to read the executive summary of the report.
You want the full report? It's just 63 pages.
Oh,
So
excellent. We have
no
that
big
too.
deal. No big deal. Yeah. So we are, just to give a little bit of context, we partnered with Silicon Valley Council of Nonprofits on this. And so they are our sister organization in Santa Clara County. And we thought it was important to do this regionally, even though we did a deep dive on each county. So we worked also with Joint Venture Silicon Valley, and they looked at the tax data of all of the nonprofits in our region. So one, I think, remarkable number is that in the broader region, San Mateo County and Santa Clara County, there are 10,000 nonprofits. And so obviously we have like a smaller slice of that here in San Mateo County, still really, I think, an economic engine, a contributor, obviously, with the 2,700 that you mentioned. I think the headlines were that we are still, extremely dependent upon. I think there are some distinct challenges. So the first one is that programs and services continue to increase. And those pandemic levels that we saw, like in a lot of cases, nonprofits that are doing those frontline services are seeing returns to those pandemic levels. And so Second Harvest is a good example. They've, recently talked with their CEO, Leslie, and their food bank lines, they've expressed are really, just as long as they were during the pandemic. So we know that, the economy right now has contributed to that, and obviously the cost of living here in San Mateo County. So that is one challenge that became very clear in the report. By the way, we also, in addition to looking at the tax data, we did survey the nonprofits. The second thing is that there is, as always, there's need for funding general operations, and that continues to be a huge need. And then there are more specific operational needs that need to be filled. Sort of, I think a lot of folks are talking about the importance of racial justice work in organizations, but nonprofits are finding it challenging to find funding for that kind of work, right? And so that's another thing that came out in the report. The other thing, and this is also anecdotally the number one thing that comes up, is that hiring and retention is kind of this existential threat for nonprofits, specifically San Mateo County, extremely challenging environment for recruitment and retention. And so this is an area that Thrive has been working on for sure. And we know that, again, everything comes back to like housing in the region. And then finally, there's interest in strategic alliances, partnerships, collaborations, all of that. But there's also this sense that those things are great, but hey, those are a luxury for some organizations and the funding isn't necessarily there for it. And so people are really interested in partnering on advocacy and on all sorts of things. But again, for those organizations that are really specifically focused on delivering services, do they have the flexibility to do that kind of work? And so again, that's kind of a call to philanthropy and to government to be more, to fund partnerships and to fund collaborations and to fund the costs associated with partnering and collaborating.
Hmm. Touching on that point of partnering and collaborating, as you know, one of our goals in Leadership Council is to really foster that cross-sector collaboration between government, nonprofit, and the private sector. And you do that as well. And you're always you're bringing in the private sector as well to accomplish a lot of the goals that you've set. How are we doing in partnering? How are we doing with that partnership with the business community in San Mateo County?
Well, let me first talk about partnering with the public sector because they get some kudos, I think. So let's just start there. I think I'm really impressed with, I think, how the county has really worked to increase its kind of time listening to nonprofits. So even the way that I think, right now we've got a group that meets, our policy and advocacy steering committee meets regularly with the county to provide feedback on the contracting process. So they are open to hearing that feedback. They want to help inform how they tweak the contracting process. So I think that's really positive, and hopefully a step in the right direction. And I think the county's been very intentional about trying to host town halls to go into communities, especially recently when they rolled out their new Measure K process. And so it wasn't perfect, but I think they did a lot of listening. And I think that was really commendable. So I really appreciate that there's an interest in kind of expanding the dialogue. So that's really positive. I feel with the private sector, I think as they start to reopen, and it's been a very slow kind of, I mentioned I was on LinkedIn's campus today and people are back and people are, I think open again to kind of re-engaging dialogue with the nonprofit sector. But I think there was definitely during that pandemic period, I think there was a lot of retraction. And so I guess my call to the private sector is now that, we're here and we're definitely, I think we have a little bit of, I know for Thrive, we didn't have any bandwidth during the pandemic to really engage corporate partners, frankly. And now I think we all are kind of really interested in that reopening that dialogue. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. I think I just have to say we were set back a little bit, I think. I think that's fair to say. And now there's an opportunity to kind of reconnect.
Oh, fantastic. And then switching gears a little bit, at the beginning of, I guess it was just before, so the end of 2022, you launched a COAD, which is the community's a community organization. Sorry, I apologize. Community organizations acting in disaster, and that COAD was meant to, or its purpose is to help community organizations be responders in disaster. And it was very timely because as you were launching it, we entered into one of our worst sort of weather situations on the coast last year, as well as having a mass shooting on the coast and several instances where you were called to action. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the COAD and how it's doing a year later. And now that you definitely had baptism by fire and had it up and running impressively. And how is it going a year later?
Yeah. So thank you for bringing up Thrive Rise. It is our newest, kind of largest initiative, and it's Thrive Rise stands for Resilience and Shared Emergencies, and the idea is that we can come together and be resilient in the face of these disasters. Even though we don't want to have to keep being resilient, we know that it's necessary. And COADs are actually a national model. So co-eds are community organizations active in disaster. And we found that San Mateo County didn't have one co-ed. And so, yes, obviously the government sector has emergency operations centers and they've got a plan for what to do in the case of emergencies, but there wasn't a coalition of nonprofits that were ready to connect with government. And there were actually, there's one that's on the coast side. There were pockets of them, but there wasn't one. And so we now have our director of community resilience, Anna Mascolta, who was brought on to run this a year ago. And again, I think I mentioned this in our conversation last year. It was right before vacation. And I said, okay, well, we need not a 30-page strategic plan, but a 1-page plan on what to do in case, because I said Murphy's Law is that while we're on vacation, something will happen. And so, but fortunately we had, we had at least kind of an activation plan that was simple. And one of the key elements of it was that we had 2 staff people going to the emergency operations center, literally driving through, again, like floods to get to the emergency operations center. And that was valuable because there was a voice for nonprofits there. And those nonprofits are the voice of the individuals in the community. So we were actually getting messages from nonprofits and community members about things happening in, trailer communities. And we were able to relay that information, but using our access points of the nonprofit sector. I think our team was able to also partner with the United Way when they were creating a dialogue for emergency 211, a script for 211. So when people call 211, how would they be routed and what would the script say? And I mean, again, it's an imperfect process, but it was something that Thrive was able to provide real-time support on. And so again, we had hired Anna in September, and then this happened on New Year's Eve. And I think, right? Wasn't it New Year's Eve? Yeah. And so everything happened very quickly. But in terms of what should happen, it's really important that we don't wait for a disaster. So right now we've got our monthly meetings with Thrive Rise and folks are getting together. We have different sort of sub areas that are starting to form around, various types of organizations that are starting to build coalitions. So I think in terms of learnings, I would say one is, it's better to have a simple plan than, it's just something very, very simple, even for your organization whether you're representing a nonprofit, whether you're thinking about your own home, whether you're thinking about whatever you're thinking about, it's better to have at least a starting point and a simple plan. And then it's really important to connect with these larger coalitions. I think Thrive Rise is now also really exploring this idea of resilience hubs and how do we use, churches and other areas in the community to really provide more of an infrastructure in the case of emergencies. And so there are really creative collaborations that are happening right now in that space as well.
That's great. Well, that actually ties in beautifully to our learning day, which will be happening after Human Services, which is building safe communities. We'll be talking about emergency preparedness, and we are going to be meeting. Anna is coming to speak, and we're going to be meeting in the Regional Operations Center, the Rock, in San Mateo County. So that was a perfect introduction for next month as well. And then just sort of a closing question. We have obviously a lot of our participants are already involved in the nonprofit sector, either working or partnering. But for those who want to get more deeply involved, or for those who aren't currently involved, what do you suggest in terms of supporting the nonprofit sector?
So one exciting initiative that we're involved with right now is just this past year, in partnership with Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, we launched our Thriving Nonprofit Workforce Series. And within that, we're reimagining like recruitment for nonprofits and the nonprofit job fair. And we are launching an HR learning series. And then we are also rebooting our popular Onboard, which was a pre-pandemic event that ran for several years. And it's the idea of, hey, you know what, you may not work at a nonprofit, but you certainly could volunteer and be a board member at a nonprofit. And so That's just something to keep an eye out for as part of our nonprofit workforce development program. So many other opportunities. We have our Thrive Action groups in all those different issue areas that I talked about. And so if you're passionate about the arts or children education, you can talk to our team. There are so many different kinds of programs. Environment sustainability, absolutely talk to us if you're interested in our climate summit. That's always a huge and fun event.
Fantastic. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for doing this and for the time. And you will also be there on the learning day, so everyone gets to meet you in person. And this allows us to sort of leapfrog a lot of the information for the day and really provide just some great background. And as I said, actually lead into the next day as well. So so thank you so much for taking the time. We really appreciate it.
Great to be here and looking forward to seeing everyone next week.
Thanks.